When we talk about avoidance and the way they behave in relationships, the first thing we need to understand is this paradox. The very moment they feel the strongest pull toward you, the moment they want you the most, is often the exact moment they push you away. Now, on the surface, that doesn't make sense. It feels backwards. You would think wanting someone would make a person move closer, not further. But for an avoidant, desire and distance go hand in hand, almost like two sides of the same coin. Why? Because closeness triggers fear. See, avoidant attachment doesn't develop in a vacuum. It's almost always born out of early life experiences where closeness was either inconsistent, unsafe, or outright unavailable. Maybe their caregivers were loving one moment but withdrawn the next. Maybe expressing emotions led to criticism or rejection. Over time, they learned something very powerful. If I don't depend on anyone, I can't be hurt. That becomes the script they carry into adulthood. So here's where the paradox kicks in. Deep down, avoidants still crave intimacy. They still long for connection, just like anyone else. That's the human condition. We are wired for belonging. But because of those old survival strategies, intimacy feels dangerous. So as soon as they sense it's within reach, alarms go off in their nervous system. Wet. This feels too close. This feels unsafe. I better create space before I lose myself or get hurt. That's the push. And it's not always conscious. It's automatic, almost like a reflex. Think about it like this. Imagine you've touched a hot stove in the past. Even if today the stove is cold, your body still remembers the pain, and you flinch away without even thinking. That's what avoidants are doing in relationships. They're flinching. Not because you're hurting them, but because closeness itself reminds them of past wounds. Now, here's the tricky part. If you're on the receiving end, their withdrawal feels like rejection. It feels personal, like you're not enough, or like they don't actually care. But in most cases, that couldn't be further from the truth. What's really happening is they care so much that their system gets overwhelmed. The desire is there, the connection is real, but it clashes with their survival instinct. And when survival is on the line, instinct wins every time. This paradox, the push when they want to pull, isn't just psychological, it's philosophical too. It reflects a deeper truth about human beings. We often sabotage the very thing we most desire. How many times have you wanted success, but procrastinated on the steps that would get you there? How many times have you wanted health, but reached for comfort food instead of a workout? Avoidants are no different. They want love, they want closeness, but the old wiring makes them run in the opposite direction. It's not logical, it's human. The reason this matters, why I'm spending so much time unpacking it, is because understanding this paradox is the first step toward compassion. If you're in a relationship with an avoidant, it changes the way you interpret their distance. Instead of reading it as disinterest, you can start to see it as fear. And when you see it as fear, your response shifts. You stop chasing, demanding, or shaming them. And you start creating the kind of safety that slowly lowers their guard. And if you are the avoidant, hearing this should spark some self-awareness. You have to realize that your instinct to pull away isn't proof that you don't want love. It's proof that you've been hurt before. The paradox isn't a flaw, it's a defense. But here's the empowering part: defenses can be unlearned. The moment you recognize, oh, I'm pushing away because I'm scared, not because I don't care, you create a crack in the armor. And through that crack, intimacy can begin to grow. So yes, avoidants push away when they want you the most. But it's not rejection. It's not absence of love. It's a paradox rooted in fear. And once you see it clearly, You can stop personalizing their distance and start navigating it with wisdom. Because here's the truth, every paradox in life is an invitation to pause, to reflect, and to choose differently. The avoidant paradox is no different. You can see it as the end of connection, or you can see it as the beginning of deeper understanding. And maybe, just maybe, the next time someone pulls away at the very moment they want you most, instead of asking, "What's wrong with me?" you'll ask, "What pain are they protecting themselves from?" That shift in perspective changes everything. If the paradox explains what avoidants do, pulling away when they want closeness, then the next natural question is why? Why does intimacy, something so many of us crave, feel so threatening to them? The answer lies in two things: vulnerability and control. See, for an avoidant, closeness is never just closeness. It's exposure. It's the moment when the walls they've built their whole life start to crack. Vulnerability means handing someone the power to see the softest parts of you, the parts that feel weak, flawed, or unworthy. And for someone who grew up learning that those parts weren't safe to show, vulnerability doesn't feel like love. It feels like danger. Imagine being a child and reaching for comfort, only to be met with coldness, criticism, or inconsistency. In that moment, your nervous system records a truth. If I open up, I'll get hurt. So you adapt. You learn to shut down your feelings, to rely only on yourself, to keep others at arm's length. That adaptation becomes your armor. And here's the thing about armor. It keeps you safe, but it also keeps you isolated. Fast forward to adulthood. You meet someone you care about, maybe even love. Your heart wants to step forward, but your survival system remembers the danger. Vulnerability equals risk. Risk equals loss of control. So instead of leaning in, you lean out. Instead of softening, you harden. And the cruel irony is this: the more they want you, the more exposed they feel, and the more they retreat. Let's be clear about something here. Avoidants are not cold, unfeeling robots. They're deeply emotional, often more than they realize. But because their emotions feel overwhelming and unsafe, they push them down, cover them up, or rationalize them away. Control becomes their way of surviving. Control over their space, control over their emotions, control over how close anyone gets. Because if they control it, they can't be blindsided. They can't be abandoned. They can't lose themselves. Think about it. Intimacy is the one area of life where you can't script the outcome. You can control your career, your finances, even your health to a certain extent. But love is unpredictable. Love requires surrender. And surrender is the exact opposite of control. For an avoidant, that feels like free fall. So they build a narrative in their head. I'm better off alone. I don't need anyone. I'm fine as I am. It's not because they don't care. It's because caring terrifies them. And here's where this connects to all of us, not just avoidance. Because if you think about it, we all resist vulnerability in some way. We all have moments where control feels safer than openness. Maybe you've been in a meeting where you had a brilliant idea, but stayed silent because you feared judgment. Maybe you've wanted to tell someone you love them, but swallowed the words because rejection felt unbearable. That's the same mechanism at play. The avoidant pattern just takes it to an extreme. So what does this mean for relationships? It means when an avoidant pulls back, they're not saying, "I don't care about you." They're saying, "I'm terrified of what will happen if I let go of control." If you can see that, if you can understand that their withdrawal isn't about your worth, but about their fear, you stop taking it so personally. And that changes everything. And if you are the avoidant, Here's the tough truth: your need for control is costing you the very intimacy you crave. You can't protect yourself from hurt and receive deep love at the same time. You have to choose. And yes, choosing vulnerability feels like stepping into fire. But every time you choose it, you weaken the grip of that old script. You begin to realize that not everyone will abandon you. Not everyone will betray your openness. This is where growth happens. Growth begins the moment you recognize that control is just an illusion. You can't control how someone feels about you. You can't control whether they stay or go. The only thing you can control is your willingness to show up as your real self. And paradoxically, that's what creates the deepest connection. Not armor, not distance, but presence. So the next time you feel yourself pulling away, ask, am I retreating because I don't want this, or because I'm scared of losing control? That one question can change the trajectory of your relationships, and honestly, your life. Because here's the bottom line: intimacy without vulnerability is impossible, and vulnerability without surrender is incomplete. If you want the depth, the love, the real connection, you have to be willing to let go of control. That's not weakness. That's courage. Now let's go a step deeper, because understanding the paradox and the fear of vulnerability still leaves one question on the table. How exactly do avoidants handle this fear in real time? What do they do when intimacy starts to feel overwhelming? The answer is they rely on coping mechanisms. These are the unconscious, automatic strategies they've developed over years to manage closeness. And here's what's important to realize: these strategies are not random. They're survival tools. To the avoidant nervous system, distance equals safety. So when intimacy triggers old fears, their mind and body shift into autopilot. They create space, they withdraw emotionally, they shut down conversations. Sometimes they even convince themselves they don't care, because numbing is easier than feeling exposed. If you've ever been with an avoidant, you've probably felt this shift. One moment you're connecting deeply, and the next moment, it's like a wall drops between you. They stop texting back right away. Their answers get shorter. They spend more time alone. And you're left wondering, did I do something wrong? But most of the time, it's not about you. It's about their reflexive need to protect themselves. Think of it like this. Imagine someone who nearly drowned as a child. Even as an adult, when they see water, their body tenses, their breathing changes, and they instinctively pull back. They may want to swim, but their body remembers the danger. That's what intimacy feels like for an avoidant. Closeness feels like water, and their coping mechanisms are the lifeboats they cling to so they don't drown. What makes this complicated is that these strategies are often invisible to the avoidant themselves. They don't sit there thinking, I'm going to pull away because I'm scared of intimacy. It happens below the surface. They might genuinely believe they're just busy or that they need space. They rationalize it as independence or self-sufficiency. And while independence can be healthy, for an avoidant it can become a mask, one that hides the fear of being seen too closely. Now, let's get practical. What are some of the most common coping mechanisms? Emotional withdrawal is a big one. Going silent, shutting down, keeping conversations superficial. Then there's avoidance of physical closeness, pulling back from touch, sex, or shared routines. Some distract themselves with work, hobbies, or even other people. Not necessarily in a disloyal way, but as a means to dilute the intensity of connection. And of course, there's rationalization, convincing themselves they're not ready, or not meant for relationships, or better off alone. From the outside, these behaviors look like rejection. They feel personal. But when you step back, you see they're actually protective. They're not trying to hurt you, they're trying to survive. And that perspective shift matters because it changes how you respond. Instead of meeting withdrawal with anger or panic, which only reinforces their fear, you can meet it with steadiness, with calm, with the kind of presence that slowly shows them they're safe. But let's be honest here. Understanding their coping mechanisms doesn't mean excusing them forever. Avoidants, just like anyone else, have to take responsibility for how their patterns affect relationships. If you're the avoidant, the work is to recognize when you're shutting down and ask yourself, what am I really afraid of here? The goal isn't to eliminate the instinct. It's to notice it, pause, and choose differently. Because here's the truth, coping mechanisms keep you alive, but they don't let you live. They're like training wheels you never took off. At some point, the very thing that kept you safe becomes the thing that keeps you stuck. Avoidants who never challenge their reflexes end up trapped, always wanting closeness, but never able to sustain it. And isn't that the great human tragedy? To long for something so deeply and yet push it away without realizing why. We all do it in different ways. We all have coping strategies that once protected us but now sabotage us. Maybe yours is overworking. Maybe it's people-pleasing. For avoidance, it's distance. But the pattern is universal. Our defenses often outlive their usefulness. So here's the invitation. Start seeing these coping mechanisms for what they are. Not proof of unlovability, not rejection, but protection. Once you name the pattern, you loosen its grip. You create the space for growth. And with awareness comes choice. You don't have to flinch away forever. Because at the end of the day, intimacy requires risk. You can't shield yourself and connect at the same time. You have to decide what matters more, the safety of your walls, or the possibility of love on the other side of them. So we've talked about the paradox. We've talked about the fear of vulnerability. We've talked about the coping mechanisms that keep avoidance stuck in patterns of distance. Now let's talk about what all of this points toward, the path forward. Because the truth is, avoidants aren't doomed to push away love forever. The story doesn't have to end with fear winning. There is a way toward healthy connection, but it requires something that many people overlook: safety. Avoidants don't stop pushing people away because someone lectures them into changing. They don't open up because you demand closeness or chase them harder. They don't suddenly become vulnerable because you guilt them into it. None of that works. What does work is creating an environment where safety outweighs fear, where closeness feels less like drowning and more like being held, where vulnerability stops being a liability and starts becoming a lifeline. Think about it. If someone spent their whole life learning that intimacy is dangerous, the only thing that can undo that belief is repeated experiences of intimacy that feel safe. That means consistency. It means patience. It means responding to their withdrawal with calm rather than panic, with understanding rather than judgment. Every time you do that, you're telling their nervous system, this time is different. You're not going to be abandoned. You're not going to be consumed. You're safe here. Now, I want to be clear, this doesn't mean you tolerate unhealthy behavior forever. It doesn't mean you sacrifice your own needs or beg for crumbs of connection. That's not love. That's self-abandonment. What it does mean is recognizing that real change takes time. Avoidants have decades of wiring telling them to run. You don't undo that overnight. But with compassion, with patience, with boundaries rooted in respect, you can create a space where trust grows slowly, layer by layer. And for the avoidant themselves, the path forward starts with courage. The courage to pause when your instinct tells you to run. The courage to admit, I'm not actually angry, I'm scared. The courage to share a little piece of yourself, even when every cell in your body is telling you to shut down. Because here's the reality. Healing doesn't happen in isolation. You can't think your way into intimacy. You have to practice it. You have to let someone in, little by little, until your nervous system learns that closeness can be safe too. This is where love takes on its deepest meaning. Love isn't just romance or passion. It's safety. It's the space where two imperfect people can put down their defenses and be fully seen. And ironically, that's exactly what avoidants crave, even if they spend years convincing themselves they don't. Because underneath the armor, underneath the withdrawal, underneath all the coping strategies, there's a simple truth: avoidants want love as much as anyone else. They just don't yet trust themselves to hold it. And that's why your role, whether you are the avoidant or the one loving them, isn't to force, but to invite safety, to invite presence, to invite patience. Because connection doesn't come from pressure, it comes from freedom. The freedom to show up exactly as you are and slowly realize you don't need the wall anymore. Now let's zoom out for a second, because this isn't just about avoidance. This is about all of us. We all have parts of ourselves we hide. We all have fears that whisper, if they really see me, they'll leave. And so we build walls, some of us with distance, some with perfectionism, some with business, some with jokes. But the path forward is always the same: safety, trust, and the willingness to risk being known. So yes, avoidants push you away when they want you most, but the ending isn't written yet. They can learn to stay. They can learn to open. They can learn to love, not with fear in the driver's seat, but with presence, courage, and trust. And the same is true for you. Wherever you've built walls in your life, you can learn to let them down. And maybe that's the real takeaway here. The path to connection is not about finding someone perfect who never triggers your fears. It's about building the kind of relationship, whether with another person or with yourself, where fear doesn't get the last word.